Welcome to Stress Test. We've got a special episode today. Pastor Scott Wilson. That's why we're wearing these hats today.
I brought our hats.
We brought our hats.
Ready, Set, Grow.
Ready, Set, Grow is an amazing organization that coaches pastors and leaders all over the country. Pastor Scott Wilson has over 30 years pastoral experience leading Oaks Church in Texas, and he has led this thriving church that he helped start a school with his father, over 5,600 students. He started a leadership training center out of this church that has trained thousands of students. And now he is the global pastor at Oaks Church and coaching pastors and fathering pastors around the country. His passion and desire are that pastors can stand on his shoulders and go further and faster and better than he ever did. Amazing, man. So I can't wait for you to be, and it's part 2. It's the sequel.
Yeah, and it's also one of his classes in his curriculum for Ready, Set, Grow, which as we've done it, we learned about sabbatical through him, and we're like, man, this is genius stuff. This is absolutely essential for pastors to figure out how to take sabbatical so that they can be rested and renewed for their ministry, rather than having to take a forced sabbatical because they're burned out and don't know what to do next, which typically happens.
Yeah, and Pastor Scott's amazing. He's very open with sharing this. So you're going to learn the difference between vacation and sabbatical, and it's going to be amazing time together with Pastor Scott. And we've known him for quite some. We've loved spending time with their family.
Love his wife Jenny, their 3 boys, Dylan, Hunter, and Dakota. 2 are married. They have grandchildren. So they've got 3 boys just like we have 3 boys,
and they got 1 grandchild on the way.
Yeah, their boys are bringing kids into the world, and we have yet to be grandparents. But
that's not a slam on our kids. But
no, I'm not bitter. But
when it's the time, it's the time.
Yeah.
Hey, it's your time right now to learn about sabbatical. So come on, it's going to be great. Hey everyone, welcome to Stress Test. We're so excited to have back with us Pastor Scott Wilson. Welcome back. You came on, came true on your promise. You said you'd be back, and you came.
Come on,
part 2.
Back.
Nothing like the sequel.
My friends, what do you think? I got to be here for you guys. You're my buddies.
I love it. Well, you have made us feel so great to be able to say, we're going to do the sequel here. We didn't get it all in. And
too much good stuff.
Yeah, really, really good. Give us an update quick on you, though. How are you doing?
Oh, fantastic. We're about to head out today after the podcast and go on a little trip with the family. So it's not going to be like what we're talking about today, a sabbatical. It's going to be a vacation. And there is a definite difference. Okay?
Yes. Perfect. Well, why don't you start with that? What's the difference?
The perfect lead in to the difference between sabbatical. Because, Pastor Scott, I need time off. You hear that from the pastors you're coaching all the time, the pastors you're fathering. You hear it from me. Okay, we're all saying we need time off. But you say you don't just need time off. What's the difference between that?
Well, what was an awakening to me is when I came back from sabbatical that I had the first 2 years, which is silly that I didn't learn from the first year. I just thought it was an anomaly that I came back from being off for 4 weeks and I was more tired, more frustrated, more depressed than I was before. And I'm going, well, that didn't work. And I thought it was just like, well, I guess that wasn't enough time, or I guess I didn't rest good enough, whatever. So I did it the next year the same way. And basically when I went to my counselor, I said, this isn't working. He goes, well, what did you do? And I said, well, I just slept as late as I wanted, went and played golf when I wanted, watched movies when I wanted, ate what I wanted, And I thought that's kind of what you do. Just do what you want. And that's restful. And he said, well, that doesn't sound like anything else you do in your life. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I know you, And if I ask you right now what you have planned next week for work, you could take me through hour by hour on what you're doing and why you're doing it and what's the objective and how it fits into the bigger picture. How come you don't take your rest as serious as you do your work?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I don't even know what you're talking about, because to me, rest is the absence of work. Like, if I'm not working, then that means I can rest. He said, not necessarily so. That's like saying your car, the tank, you look at the gas tank and it says it's empty. And if I go park it in my driveway on empty, if I wake up the next day because I let it, quote unquote, rest, the tank will be refilled.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
That's
You
really
have to
good.
drive to a gas station and intentionally, on purpose, fill it up with gas. So it isn't the absence of work that restores you. It's actually an intentional act of restoration that has to happen. So for me, there's vacations. That's like what I'm going to do in the next 3 days with my family. My kids are going. My grandkids are going. We're going to have a great time. We're going to go to the water park. We're going to have a good time. But you know what that purpose is? The purpose there isn't for me to get restored. The purpose there is actually I'm going to burn energy to love on to make memories,
Yeah.
to love on my kids and my grandkids, to connect with them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Holidays, when you go Christmas to your family, that ain't a vacation.
Yeah.
Have you ever gone on a vacation and come back and said, I need a vacation from my vacation?
Yes.
Many times.
You've expended so much energy. I remember one time going on Christmas holiday with my wife, and we go to her parents' house, and she's the oldest of 7 kids. And when all of them were still in the house, and they're nuts, they're crazy, running all over the place like kids do. And I remember sitting there going, man, I got to get out of here. I got to go over here and read. And Jenny goes, what do you mean? This isn't time for you to be away. This is time for you to be with my family. I said, no, it's Christmas. It's time for me. And she said, no, this is a missions trip. What do you mean? She said, you go on missions trips. And when you go on missions trips, you wake up early, you do your job, you go love on people, you go serve people, you go minister to people. I need you to get your head on straight to understand this week at Christmas at my parents' house is a missions trip to my family. And you need to serve them, and you need to love them, and you need to be intentional about it. So vacations, holidays, they spend your energy to connect with people. Sabbatical is about connecting with God to be restored, connecting in alignment with who you are and what God's called you to do and to be. And it's about getting with people that restore you, getting books and activities that restore you. It's purposely going to the spiritual, emotional gas station and getting refilled. So there is a total difference.
So I love that, to be filled and to be restored. You know, a lot of our congregations look at it. The majority of people in our working jobs, they take vacation time. They don't necessarily see this. How do you get the congregation on board with this concept? Because I know we live in a church culture of 24/7 mentality, and there's a little bit of that, and that's one thing. But another is just understanding what their pastor needs. How did you do that?
Well, I think, first of all, we got to realize that people who are working jobs get tired too. We can't just think, well, we got the most difficult job in the world. We hear that, and maybe we do, maybe we don't. But to go toot our own horn and tell everybody, you don't know what it's like being a pastor, I don't think is exactly the best strategy.
Right.
I think probably the best strategy is to say, hey, I don't need extra vacation. You guys have already blessed me with vacation time. And that's a time I can be with my family. That's time that we can do some things to connect. But what I do need is some time where I can pray and I can connect with God and I can hear from the Lord about this next season for our church. And I can clear time. Right now, I am so focused on what I'm supposed to preach Sunday, what we need to do in making decisions immediately, that it's hard for me to think future because I'm so focused on now. And so if I could have some time to do that, I think that would be beneficial not only for me, but for our church. And so there's multiple arenas to this because they need to understand the spiritual dynamic of Sabbath and sabbatical, of course, and we can talk about that. But I don't know that in the first time of me talking to the board, I really kind of talked to them about, I need time to think. I need time that it isn't about thinking about now, it's thinking about the future, praying about the future. I feel as though God wants to take us to another level. That's going to take another level of thinking, another level of hearing. And so I need to set aside time to do that. That doesn't sound like vacation time. That doesn't sound like, well, I don't get 8 weeks off. I don't get 3 months off, this. So it's doing that. Now, I'm different. I take sabbatical every year for a month instead of it being like I wait 7 years and then take 3 months off, which isn't bad either, and that's fine. It's just the way that I'm wired. I need it every year, but I only need 4 weeks in it for how I do it. And then now I take another week at the end of the year. So at the end of the year, when it's holiday and it's already kind of getting into that season where everybody's all over the place, I'll take a week off. A lot of time for me, it isn't the week between Christmas and New Year, which is when sometimes people do it. I take vacation during that time because my family's all around.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So my time is really after Thanksgiving and that weekend and that next week.
That's great.
And that's my time that I kind of reflect on the year. Where are we going this next year? All those different things. So I think number one, telling them that it's a difference between vacation and sabbatical, the purpose and how it works. Secondly, I think probably the best thing that happened to me is at the beginning, I needed an advocate to go in and talk to the board that they respected, telling them that I needed this. And that for me was Dr. Sam Chan, who told them, hey, your pastor, at the level he's at, he's carrying a spiritual weight and load that is hard for all of us to understand. But there is a need for him to get away so he can hear from the Lord. Just like we see in the Bible, people who are the men of God, the women of God, they had to set time apart to go do that, and that benefited the whole house. And so I think a lot of times some of these things have to be started in the beginning with an advocate.
Do you find that, I was just thinking through Bible stories and just the human experience, that if we don't take that sabbatical time, then God often structures something to happen so that we have to take it, like so, Elijah in the desert. Not only that, think about, the most crazy, unbelievable thing. I remember seeing it for the first time. It talks about it in 2 Chronicles 36:21. I looked it up today just so I could look it back up. First time I ever realized this, I was freaking out over it, and now I just can't believe it. It says this. It says that the Israelites went into the promised land and they were there for 800 years, but 490 of the last years, they did not take Sabbath for the land. Wow. Yeah.
So the land, see, you had Sabbath that was going to be weekly, every 7 days for you personally. The land was every 7th year.
Right.
So you could work the land for 6 years, but in the 7th year, you were to let the land rest. Which, remember this, I want you to understand, all of God's laws and are principles that are for our good.
Right.
They're not rules to hold us back or to hinder us from great things. Like, why are you trying to tell me I can't sow a crop this year? How are we going to eat? No, that's trusting God that his way is better and he's going to provide. But the land, in order for it to restore the minerals and everything that needed to be in there for the crops to be the best they could be and for the land to produce as good as it could, it needed to have a rest year.
Yeah.
But did you know for 490 years they didn't do it? So guess what? It says in Leviticus 26:33, that's what they were supposed to do. But in Leviticus in 25, it says that. In 26:33, it says, because they did not do it for 490 years, they were taken into captivity outside of the land for 70 years, which is exactly the many years they had skipped Sabbath.
Wow.
Wow. That is
So
cool. I've not seen
490 divided by 7
Yeah.
is 70. And
Right.
so for 70 years, the land, and you know what it says in that passage? And the land received its Sabbath rest.
Wow.
So here's the point. I think you're exactly right. If we don't take Sabbath, God will set us up to be able to do Sabbath.
And I think a lot
We'll
of
wind
times,
up in the hospital bed.
exactly, it
We'll
ends up
wind
being a
up
health
sick.
issue. Yeah. Yeah.
And so sometimes we go, man, I just worked so hard, I got sick. Well, some of it is just like it's the principle. You can either rest proactively or your body is going to command a rest. You know, those are the things I think are important. And it's all about trusting God. When we tithe, what are we saying? I'm going to give you the first fruit because I'm going to trust that the 90% I have is going to go further than if I kept the 100%. So I trust you with the 10%. It's a trust. I trust you more than I trust myself and my ability.
Right.
In the same way with our time, Sabbath and sabbatical is a principle of tithing our time. It's saying, I'm giving you this time, trusting that you can do more in 6 days with me honoring you with this day than if I didn't. And by the way, Sabbath isn't a suggestion, it's a command. And anybody who says, well, the devil doesn't take a day off, well, I'm not exactly trying to take my example from him. I'm taking my example from God, who didn't need a day off,
But he took it anyway.
but did take it.
Yeah.
Why? To model it for us.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Wow. You know, these lessons that you have that are they're rolling off your tongue like it's like you've been doing this forever. But I know that you paid a price to get these lessons.
Yeah, the reason why it's just flowing out like that, like it just kind of how I think is because it's been such an issue of my life that I wasn't good at. And that I've had to study and I've had to go deep. And even now, as I was preparing for us to talk, and you just said, hey, let's talk about Sabbath, I just kind of started writing down some notes. I'm going, God, I need to get better at this. I know this. There's a difference between knowing it and doing it. And that's where deception lives. You know, where you can be deceived because you've taught this, you've done this. But I looked back now and go, man, I need to get better at that. I need to up my game on that.
Yeah.
Because this is not something you fix, it's something you manage. Your whole life is this tension between what's God's lane and what's my lane. And if you ever get into God's lane, you're going to talk about stress. When you start putting yourself in the position to have to do impossible things, to have to do the things that only God can do. So you got to stay in your lane, which means it's like this, you know, I can't pray. I heard T.D. Jakes say this the other day, and I thought it was genius. He said, you don't pray things into existence like this. It doesn't work like, God, I need you to give me a chair. Give me a chair. No, he gave you a tree. You already got the tree. Your job is to go take the tree, cut it down, you know, to build the chair.
Right.
He said, so basically God will provide everything you need, but that's his lane. The tree's his lane. The lane over here you're in charge of is either go buy the chair, get the chair, make the chair. You know, he's provided you what you need. So in other words, does God do miracles? Yes. But in most of the time, there's the God lane. God is the one who brings the increase, but I've got to do the work to receive the people as a pastor. God is the one who gives me the word. It's my job to set aside time to hear it. Okay, but if I try to get into God's lane, man, you're going to mess yourself up. That's what Sabbath is about, is to remind ourselves there's a God lane and then there's my lane.
That's so good.
I feel like pastors, and us included, tried to kill two birds with one stone and do a vacation / sabbatical. So you sit and read at the beach or whatever while your kids are playing. Can you talk about how to structure a sabbatical correctly?
Yeah. So when I talked to my counselor at that time, I said, well, I don't understand what you're talking about. He said, well, do it like you would your work. I said, he said, how do you do that? And I said, well, first of all, I get an objective in my heart and my mind of what God is calling me to do. So I'm asking God to speak to me about what is he wanting me to accomplish. And then I aligned my calendar to be in alignment with that. And so the first thing I've got to do is these are the 3 questions I ask before I go on sabbatical.
That's good.
To help. Okay, ready? Number 1, what do I need to accomplish? And you say, well, why would you say accomplish anything on a sabbatical? Because that's exactly what I'm trying to do. This is mental, emotional, replenishing stuff that takes intentionality to go to the gas station. So what am I wanting to accomplish? What do I want to get? And what I mean by that is, is number 2, what do I want to hear from God? So I always go into sabbatical with, God, I don't know what we're supposed to do in this next season. God, I don't know how to fix this staff situation.
Right.
God, I'm not sure how to deal my emotions around my son not living for the Lord. I mean, there's questions and issues that are deep. Come on. Everybody right now, if I said, what are you stressed out over? That's the question you need to hear from God.
Right.
And so what do I want to accomplish? I want to get my next fall series together, or whatever it is, okay? That's an accomplish. Number 2, what do I want to hear from God? And then what do I want to focus my attention on? Mm-hmm. So those are the things. And then what I do is when I here are my 4 questions I need to hear from God about. And when I say question, I mean like, I'm not talking about, hey, God, should I wear these shoes? Or, should I wear, what do you want me to do like next week? I'm talking about big stuff. I'm talking about, God, what are we supposed to open another campus?
Right.
God, where should that campus be? Hey, are you wanting me to train? I mean, the biggest decisions of my life, I have considered many times on these times of reflection and prayer. So I plan my day around it. So I just pulled one of my calendar sheets out and printed it from just one of the days. So here's a day.
Oh, I love it.
At 5:30 to 7 in the morning, I got up and I prayed and I read the Bible, and I added value by sending out some texts to people I was praying for that morning. And I had a list of people over on my sabbatical that I wanted to encourage. That encourages me. Then at 7 to 9, I said, I need to hear from God about this series coming up that we're doing. And I have a message I've got to preach that I don't know what I'm going to say, what God wants me to say. And so I did that from 7 to 9. And then from 9 to 10, I evaluated my calendar from last year. So I went through the whole year and I asked myself, I always evaluate the year on my first week of sabbatical. And then I do it again in Thanksgiving, okay? But here's how I evaluate. I write these things down. What do I want to celebrate from this last year? So I go through my whole calendar of everything that went on. What do I want to celebrate? So that's being grateful, being thankful, giving praise. Number 2, what did I learn? What are the things I learned this year? So I go through my notebooks. I have my bullet journals like this, and I go through it on what I wrote about those days and everything, what I was learning. Number 3, who are the people I connected with that I'm grateful for and that I want to text or say thank you to and say, man, this year was cool that I got to meet you or be with you. And then what do I want to do more of this next year? Mm-hmm. What do I want to do less of? And what do I want to stop doing? I always want to try to figure out what do I don't want to do anymore and isn't working. And this next, or like I had to do last year, but I don't want to do it this year because that's not the season I'm in. The only way you can do more things is when you determine first what you're not going to do. You're going to do less things. So then I do that there. And then I went from 10 to 12 and I started asking God in this one about what does it look like to transition into the next role I was having to become what I do now out of the church. And then I did lunch from 12 to 12:30. Then I took a nap from 12:30 to 2. And then I at 2 o'clock, I woke up, and from 2 to 3:30, I read a book that I had selected. I had 3 books on this retreat that I was going to read. The Culture Code, The Making of a Moment, and Just Mercy. And so I read it, and I took notes, and I thought about what I read. And then I worked out at 3:30. And then at 5:30, that's when I open up my schedule to be with Jenny and the family and whatever she wants. This brings us to this point. When you schedule sabbatical, you can schedule your days like this ahead of time with an estimated time frame of what you think it's going to take to hear from God on this and how much time. Like when I say I'm going to do 2 hours on that message, that mean that is the whole time I'm going to do that message. That's just I'm going to do 2 hours there, and I don't want to keep going, or that I want to do these other things. But then the next 3 days from then, I'll work on the message again. So I have it in there of how much time I think it's going to take on these things. But here's the thing I have to do. This is so important, Shane. I have to talk to Jenny, my wife, through my schedule before we actually activate and do it.
Right.
Why? Because otherwise she'll go like, oh my gosh, what are you doing on sabbatical? You don't even talk to me. Okay. or, hey, so can we go do this today? She knows ahead of time we've already agreed upon these days are for this.
Right.
This day is for this. This day is for this. And on the days that are my sabbatical days that are just normal, like an ideal week of sabbatical, I work from morning till 5:30. And after 5:30, Jenny can schedule anything she wants for us to do.
Right.
As a family, with her, doing whatever. And when you agree on it, then she knows I'm not ignoring her.
Yeah.
She knows that I'm not, you just take time off. You know, you want to take time, but you're trying to take sabbatical from me. You know, those miscues can be handled by conversations up front. Here's the other thing. I learned now after doing 5 more good sabbaticals, 5, is I learned this. The very first week of my sabbatical needs to be a silent retreat. So what I do is I go away. It doesn't matter if it's anywhere. I mean, like the first 3 years I went to a monastery because nobody else was talking.
Right.
So that helped me anyway on that. The last 2 years, I've gone to a place that's just like a Airbnb that's out in the country type thing. And I could go there and there's restaurants around I could go eat at, but nobody's going to bother me there. And I take a week, and that's where I'm doing a lot of my prayer and thinking away by myself. Why do I do it the first week? Because Jenny says I'm a different person when I come home from that.
Yeah.
If it's the 3rd week or the 4th week, guess what I'm doing the whole time? I'm bothered. I'm sorry that I shook there. I hit the tape. I get bothered and can't wait for that week. And so I'm stressed out until I hear from God and what it takes me to get in that week. So she said, I'd rather you do that week 1, and then we'll have a better 3. So
Can we just pause for a moment? Can we just pause for a moment and imagine you in a monastery?
Not talking.
Not talking. I just imagine
I'd like
him.
to imagine you in a monastery not talking.
You'd like just for me not talk, but just going into like you're walking up to some of the monks and saying, "Hey, what's going on in there?"
I could totally do that. I could go a week without talking.
All right, sorry to interrupt. I couldn't stop imagining it.
It was, well, the first year I was nervous about it. So I'm like, how am I going to go a week without talking?
Sure.
Okay. But you have to get in your mind, this isn't again, all of God's commands, principles, processes are for your good. It's not like Sabbath was made to be holy for Sabbath reasons. You know, like Sabbath isn't, I don't live for the Sabbath is there for me, you know? Yeah. And so this not talking was about me not having to expend any energy to interact with other and connect with other people. And so it ended up, I didn't have one problem with it at all. I went in and ate, I went and prayed, I exercised, I prayed, I did all this stuff and had no responsibility to have to be in connection with anyone. It actually is the most life-giving, unbelievable thing. I look forward to it every year. It's my favorite week.
That's
and
amazing.
I know that makes everybody feel bad, like, well, what's wrong with us? Why don't you want to be with us? It's just I get to be with God and to hear from God, and it's the greatest stuff that ever happened. The biggest stuff I get happens in that week. It's a game changer. Then I also...
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, do you only go away that first week and then you stay home the other weeks, or do you think it's... Or maybe it varies person to person.
Everybody's different.
Yeah, it has to be someplace else.
Everybody's different. For me, that's a week that's sacred for just me, okay? The other weeks we may go, like on this one, I looked back at this year, and Jenny and I went to Michigan with some friends for 3 days, and we stayed at a nice place and just did that because Jenny wanted that to be, hey, let's go with our best friends. That'll be restoring to us, and I can be a part of that, and we can go do that. but there was no agenda. I wasn't speaking somewhere. We weren't trying to tag that on. Hey, that'll pay for our trip, all this. In fact, our church gives me $4,000 a year to cover any expenses of going places, going to the monastery, whatever I need to do those things. That's important. They're investing in that. But I think sometimes you can travel. Some people like to travel. Travel is restoring to them and bring it. And so they plan a trip to Europe, or they plan a sabbatical to go study in Scotland or something. Cool, great. Whatever is that for you and how God built you, you need to do that. But for me, it's really that 1 week away, and then Jenny and I agreeing on what's going to be sabbatical for her too. I mean, I'm not the only one who's tired and needs to be restored. She does too.
Yeah.
So the other three things I think on when I'm scheduling that retreat and all those days is, what books do I want to read for the season I'm in? So it's not just about reading books. It's about what material do I need to put in my heart to help me hear from God and get data. Yeah. I'm not data driven. I'm data informed. I'm spirit driven, Christ centered, and data informed. But what data do I need to help with what I'm hearing from God? And then who do I need to meet with? So I schedule during that time to meet in those 4 weeks 3 times with my counselor personally, and 2 times in my marriage, so that I'm going deep. It's just a purposeful time to go, okay, God, where am I at? What am I doing? What's going on? So I'll do that. And then the whole time I'm on, I have my bullet journal, and I'm writing in every day everything I need to do when I get back, who I need to talk to about what do I need to change? So it's not like I'm going, well, that's work. Sometimes people say, well, you're just working the whole time. I'm actually clearing my mind and getting the stress issues out and organized of how to function, when usually I'm feeling like I'm having to do that on the fly.
Right.
So that's kind of the planning on it.
I love it.
Great.
You talked about getting your spouse ready and owning. You talk about owning it together, which is, I love that. But you have a team that you're leading. How do you get your team to own this? And I'm sure there's some preparatory time. I know you've taught me about how you get them ready.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's huge, because a lot of times people say, I can't take off a sabbatical. My church will be mad. They'll be frustrated. It'll fall apart, all that. First of all, if it'll fall apart with you gone, then you're not doing very good for fulfilling Ephesians 4:11 that says we're to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, for the edification of the body of Christ.
That's right.
You really need to figure out how to get that together. But just because you have it organized to function, sometimes we're so dysfunctional we can't disconnect, and we can't let them disconnect because we're so tied into it that we're not being able to do it. So I think what you need to do before you go is you need to organize yourself for success, okay? So what that means is you need to set up, first of all, preaching. Half your church won't even know you're gone except for you're not preaching, okay? So you know what Chris does now here, Chris Rayleigh, when he takes off July, and does it as his study break and does that. He does it where he calls it summer heat. And summer heat here means he's bringing in John Maxwell, Charlotte Gamble. He's bringing in, who does he have this year? Choco. I mean, he's bringing in big speakers that basically, here it is. It doesn't, most of the time your church people don't know church famous people, so they don't even care about the name unless they get in relationship with them, okay? But what they do care about is, was it any good?
Right.
So if all you're doing is filling your pulpit with your B players and C players, like, well, this would be a chance for all of our staff to speak, well, you better rethink that.
Yeah.
Because if they think you're filling the gaps with less than what you are, then they will in time resent you leaving because you're giving them a subpar ministry while you're gone. If you up the game and actually give them somebody who speaks better than you,
yes,
they'll go, when are you leaving again?
That's great.
That's
Okay.
good.
We actually, as a church, grew last year by 300 people. During that, our attendance went up 300 on average during summer heat. So you can actually use it as a win. Number two, though, isn't just about what's preaching. It's about how your team is. So your team has got to be organized. Who's in charge while you're gone? What is the chain of command of communication? If there is a surprise that comes up, an emergency that comes up, who's to be communicated to? Who's responsible for it? The other thing is you need to sit down with your staff and say, hey, here are my goals of what I'm trying to accomplish over my sabbatical. Here are the areas I want to hear from God, and whatever you can communicate to them, here's what I'm going to be doing. So they understand this isn't just me going off and it's like, I just want to have more vacation. So here's what I'm going to accomplish, God willing. Secondly, here's what I want you to accomplish. So you need to assign the team what are the goals for the time you're away for them to accomplish and to do. The calendar needs to already be set. It doesn't need to be everybody's walking in and going, well, pastor's gone, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. As if you're giving them their to-do list anyway. You're not. So you should be setting it up. What is their goals? What do they need to accomplish while you're gone? And when you get back, you want to report on these things and to hear how that went. Okay? So all of that. But the thing is what if somebody dies? What if something happens that was an emergency? There was a tornado hit. Okay? Great. There needs to be a way to get a hold of me, but it needs to be at a status of understanding clear of what needs to be told to me and what doesn't need to be told to me during this time, and who's the one who decides that. So no one calls me or talks to me on sabbatical except for my assistant and the executive. There's two people, and it's really through my assistant. And I have a check-in time at 3:00 every afternoon that I look at my Gmail. Okay. My regular church email, I don't even look at. They turn it off, and with a reply, hey, if you have anything you need to talk to, I'm on a prayer retreat. I'm seeking God about our church. Thank you for praying with me while I'm doing that. If you have something to talk to, please talk to my assistant, blah, 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 whatever. It has a little message on there. It's shut off, but I have my Gmail account on. Every day at 3, I look there, and she will give me the things that have cleared the communication of what I've desired to have. That may be so-and-so died. You need to know a board member died. Okay, whatever. Or that was not a nice thing to say. Something at the level.
You're killing board members in our examples.
You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so, hey, you need to know this was the attendance this week if I wanted to know that. Whatever I wanted to know, she's communicating to me.
Right.
Any decision that needed to be made, or it's at a level that, hey, we just need to hear from you. Is this okay? They communicate that. That's it. And then, so there's a way to reach me so I don't ever feel like, my God, are they needing me? They can get me. But it's through those two people. There's a gate. There's a filter. It's not full-on access. And they know what needs to come to me and what I want to hear about. And then other than that, it's shut off, and they're doing it. So, but if you're organized with the preaching ministry, if you're organized with it, there's something going on. You know who's going to hit hospitals, and hospitals are going to be taken care of. People are going to be taken care of. People needing somebody to counsel their marriages falling apart. You've already got it set up with the whole staff who does that anyway. And if everything's taken care of and you've handled that ahead of time, it shouldn't be a problem.
Wow.
That's great.
I love that kind of
Problem is when we don't plan that stuff.
No, exactly. And then everyone's wondering, and then they have to reach out. They have to, and that wasn't their fault. That's our fault for not setting that up.
Or everybody sort of slides on what they have to do because there's nobody there and they don't know what to do. So I get it.
We did nothing. Well,
That's good.
I'm sure this has had to impact, Scott, on you've been modeling Sabbath, restoration. I want to ask you a two-part question here, so you take it however order you want. First is, what do you think that impact has been to your church, you modeling the Sabbath and restoration? And two, what impact has that had for the rest of your pastors, especially those who carry weight, not the weight that you carry as the senior leader, but they carry weight as well? Where is that? Have you seen the fruit of that?
Huge. I think huge results, but also a couple of learnings in there that I didn't see coming. So let me just say it that way. So I think our church has benefited incredibly with me having more future thinking. I don't know that I would have been in tune as much at 50 that I was going to transition if I wouldn't have been doing this. I don't know that my when I did that, I went and saw 3 different people who had transitioned to meet with them for a whole day. John Maxwell, Sam Chan, and Coach Mullins during the sabbatical to interview them on transition and to ask all 3 of them who are personal people, like fathers in my life, to share with me, did they feel like what I was hearing from God was on? So the big issues and changing points of my life have really been thought through, prayed through, evaluated through those times. That where we're going as a church, what we're doing at church, those big things, huge because of that time set apart into God. But then also my staff, it's a mixed bag, Shane, to be honest with you, is that they get very excited that I'm going to be restored and refreshed. They also get really nervous at what I'm going to do when I get back and how much work they do. So you know what we did? The last 2 years that I was pastor, we actually called a mid-course communication day. I came in halfway through the sabbatical for an hour to meet with the executive team to tell them everything I was thinking, everything that I'd been hearing, everything going on, so that they would even get kind of a midpoint of what I was thinking, and even, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Can you guys do some work that in 2.5, 3 weeks when I get back, you guys could have thought through what would it take to do that? What do we need to do? What does it look like on the calendar? So they could, it was not a time for them to tell me all the problems. It wasn't a time, it was a time for me to unload so that they could be in the mindset of, what is he doing out there? And how is that going to impact us? So that served us well. It didn't cause me more stress. It actually caused me to get more excited because I was able to download some stuff and not have to wait that whole time to start sharing. And I'm a processor to kind of say it out loud, to get it where people can hear it. That kind of processing helps me. And so they get excited. They also get nervous. So that was one of the things we learned we might need to do.
Wow.
That's great. That was going to be my question is, does that interrupt your sabbatical mindset? And for you, you're saying it doesn't because you get to unload rather than hold it for 4 weeks.
Yeah, to me, it's not if they started catching me in the hall and going, hey, by the way, can I tell you that this person's bad and they're leaving the church or something like that? I don't need you to put stuff on me.
Yeah.
I need to unload things on you so that you can be ready to go. It's kind of like it just helped them to hit the ground running when I came back and to be better prepared for us to meet together instead of I'm here and they're back here.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. So, we've talked about a lot of things here. You've talked about, the questions you ask God. You ask these questions coming into the time you spend, what you do with it, even your schedule and the pace of that. I know that's going to be unique to a lot of people listening. And you say that. Everybody's a little different. But the most important thing is restorative time. I'm wondering if there's some other key things that you would want to say, hey, in wrapping this up, what are some suggestions you have for pastors listening, because I think...
I think particularly pastors whose boards are completely unaware that this might be helpful, or there's no money to help you go anywhere or do anything. It might take a couple years of preparatory work to get your church and your board on board. Is that what you're thinking? Like, how do you set yourself up so that this becomes something you can do every year?
Well, first of all, if I would never let it be that if I didn't have the money, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that I have to. If I was at a place where we didn't have the money to do it, or I couldn't go somewhere, I could still create. It's like I just said, you can go on a vacation or you can go on a staycation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's really about what you're doing with your time and where you're putting your energy. And so I think if I was starting and I was concerned about it, I would just share with the board, I need some time to pray and to think. I'm going to not preach the next 2 weeks, and I'm going to take 2 weeks instead of studying for the message. I'm going to ask God to speak to me about our future. So whether it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, I don't know that everybody, I mean, I know there's an emergency of I need to take 3 months off, I'm crashing. Well, then you may need to figure out that's a different deal.
Right.
You know,
Right.
if this is preventative, then I think if I was in a smaller church,
Yeah.
I didn't have as much budget and I didn't have as much staff, maybe to schedule 2 people to come preach that are really good that could come in. And when I say really good, you don't have to get somebody famous.
Right.
Just get somebody who can preach as good as you, if not better.
Yeah.
I try to get people who are better than I think are better than me to come into those days. So everybody goes, do it again. Okay. But if I had 2 weeks, 3 weeks like that, where everybody was cool. So make it a special revival if you want. We're going to have a revival. I'm going to be revived by hearing from God about our future. And in the same time, God's going to bring a spiritual infusion of revival and renewal with these 3 great dynamic speakers who are going to come and speak. Instead of me studying those weeks, I'm going to do this. Half the people think that's all you do anyway.
Right.
Is study and preach. So, you know, if you said, I'm going to give this, you get it. I mean, I would do that. You don't have to have money to set aside time on that. Those are just things that as you have it, then that makes it maybe even better if you can. But start where you're at. I think it's also important to realize the rhythms of Sabbath, just like how in the Old Testament they said take a Sabbath day for you every week. And then they had the times of celebrations and feasts where you took off certain times to worship, to eat certain things, do certain things, which was a rhythm of rest and restoration. And then you had the 7th year rest for the land. So there was different seasons and settings and patterns. I think we need to understand from that we need to take a weekly Sabbath. A day that we pray, read, think, and reconnect with God, evaluate our week, evaluate the next week, and do that. I think we need to have a Sabbath daily. Before weekly, let's just say daily. Every morning, part of your devotion time with the Lord is kind of a sabbatical daily time, a Sabbath time, where I'm just saying, God, I'm connecting with you, I'm praying, I'm seeking. Then you got your weekly, and whatever God's called you to do with that weekly, you do that, plan it on purpose, just like we're talking about here. And then you have a quarterly sabbatical day, perhaps, where you just set aside every 3 months, you've got a day where you're going, okay, how did this last quarter go? What do I want to do in this next quarter? What needs to shift? What do we need to do with our staff? We do that every single quarter. I have a day where I'm meeting with each one of our staff members about what they're to do. Well, I had to have a day before that for me to even know what all of that is and how we need to be in alignment.
Right.
So, and so that may be a different concept of sabbatical. It's really about evaluation, reconnecting with God, getting in alignment, considering where I'm at, where I'm going, and then a sabbatical week for the year or a sabbatical month for a year or something like that. And so there's seasons, there's settings, there's rhythms that I think are important. That's basically probably how I'd wrap it up, is that we just need to know how we work. And so I'm not telling everybody, you got to read books, you got to go meet with people, you got to have prayer times, your whole life needs to be totally scheduled. And you go, man, that doesn't sound restoring at all. Yeah, that's because that's how God made me. That's my gas station experience. You've got to know who you are, how your tank is filled, how your battery is recharged, and determine, what do I need to come out the other side feeling, seeing, knowing, and then how can I build this time in order to be in alignment to get that achieved?
Yeah.
That's how it is for you.
Yeah,
That's so
whatever
good.
we're doing each week to restore, we just need to do that more.
Yeah, well, and with goals, these
with goals,
goals in
right.
mind, and asking the question you ask, what do I need to heal in? How do I need to? What do I need rest? All of these questions. What do I need to grow in? Where do I? All of these questions coming in. I think that's so key, Pastor
That's
Scott.
good.
As you talk with so many other pastors about this, this whole podcast is about restoration. Really, it's stress test.
Preventative.
It's preventative to say you are stress testing your body and your mind and your emotion all the time, and you better make sure you're healthy and you better make sure you're restored. And we've got a shepherd who leads us beside still waters. So this has been refilling for me, just to hear it again. And I've heard you teach this before to me, but just to hear it again, each time I do, I hear something else. So thank you so much, Pastor.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Hey, we end our podcast a little different each time, as you know, Pastor Scott. But if you're watching for the first time, we like to pray for our guests. So if you take a moment right now and just stop what you're doing for a second and pray for Pastor Scott Wilson and all that's going on in his life. And Sue, you want to lead us?
Sure. Lord God, we love you. Thank you so much for Scott and Jenny. I pray that you would continue to bless and protect them, protect their ministry, protect Ready, Set, Grow, protect their kids, their family. I pray that as they take this little vacation with their family, that they would have the best time and be completely restored and healthy. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
you.
Thanks for
being
coming
with-
back.
Part two was even better. The sequel didn't disappoint.
No, it was great. Thanks so
Awesome.
much for your love and your wisdom. It was really great.
You got it. Love you. Thank you for doing this and for your incredible ministry, loving pastors.
Part two was even better, I think. Just so practical. I think that's what I loved about the sequel here with Pastor Scott was we got to dive in to one topic in sabbaticals. And I don't know about you. I've struggled with this, and maybe you have if you're watching, and maybe you struggle with this. But I loved how he kind of let us off the hook a little bit at the end there and said, start where you are.
Yeah.
And, if it's a staycation and it's 2 weeks of cutting meetings and sermon prep for those 2 weeks so that you can focus and do that. I think, secondly, I need to work on my preparation. That's what I struggle with, too, is getting people ready around me, preparing that. And here's, I'll just be honest and very transparent. One of the reasons I don't prepare is because I feel a little bad talking about being away. I feel I still have some guilt over not working, over taking time off. And maybe that's where you are too. And just struggling through this of how do we do that? And he said, our Lord did it. And it hit me like I'm not ashamed of it, but I'm worried about talking about something that actually not only God calls us to do, he leads us beside still waters, he restores our soul. He wants to do this, but also he did it. So I was really, really touched today by several things,
Yeah, well, and it's not this that Jesus took his time, because we talk about that. He went up to the mountain to pray. We need that weekly day where we're Sabbathing. We need a day a week, a day a month, whatever. But I think what I appreciated was him going back and talking about the whole Jewish culture was set up for sabbatical time, like the Sabbath. And we've been to Israel. The Shabbat is a big deal.
Oh my gosh!
But it isn't just that one day a week. They rested the land every 7 years, and that's also when I think. And the indentures stopped, and people who had to be enslaved, they were set free. Like it was there's a whole culture of stop what you're doing and seek the Lord, and we shouldn't feel guilty about doing that. So I think this is where it comes into the definition of a Sabbath. If we feel guilty, then we're probably not Sabbathing. or sabbaticaling, if I can make up a
Oh, that's
word,
even a better word.
the way that we should.
Sabbatical.
Otherwise, we wouldn't feel guilt, and there wouldn't be the need to clarify. Hey, I really have to take this time.
Well, and if it was,
We haven't learned what it is
Yeah.
because really it isn't time off. If you're seeking the Lord to get clarity about your ministry, that's just a different kind of ministry work.
It's critical.
It's preparation, and we do need time to prepare. So I feel like a lot of times January catches us in a crazy pattern because we didn't have the time at the end of the year to tack on everything that you were doing, right, to prepare for the next year so that you can cast the vision and get excited. It's too much, which I feel like a lot of pastors we have talked to talk about how they take December off for that reason, because they can't implement new agendas in the new year because you can't tack that on top of everything you're already doing.
Yeah, and I think finding that rhythm is individualized, but if you're in the rhythm of a day a week, a weekend a month, Sam
Right.
Chan talked about that with
Right,
us
a
on
Sunday
his
month,
episode,
yeah.
and then a month a year. If you're in these rhythms of sabbatical, if you're in these rhythms of Sabbath, then you'll be able to hear from God and be able to do it. But start where we are. Let's start where we are, and let's start taking some rest and not looking at not just vacation. Let's start taking restorative time to hear from God and start including that as a critical part of our ministry. I hope this has blessed you. Ready, Set, Grow has blessed us tremendously. And in fact, I want to say, one of the things that we preach about is have a growth team around you. It's not just one. It's just not just a counselor, not just a mentor. You need a growth team. And Ready, Set, Grow became that for us. And we're in year 3 of Ready, Set, Grow. And it's been an incredible journey. And I want to say, I don't think I would be in ministry today after going through COVID and all of the cultural shifts and changes
And the heart
pastoral
attack, yeah.
and a heart attack, if it weren't for having my growth team around me, without having Ready, Set, Grow. So we are going to be forever grateful to them. So I hope that you'll check out Ready, Set, Grow. Check them out on their social platforms as well as on their website, and consider how they might be able to help you as well. But I hope today was a great help. Hey, as always, don't miss an episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Stress Test, the Heartbeat of a Healthy Leader, and find us on any of the streaming platforms and on social media as well. God bless.